You're very welcome to CTEC's webinar. My name is Nigel Whyte, and I'm joined by Tim Donovan, who's our technical director. I suppose, apologies, we're just a couple of minutes late getting started, but we're delighted to have such a large number on board this morning to hear our technical briefing. Basically, I suppose, COVID has continued. We've had to learn to do things in different ways. So I suppose this is a useful way of being able to get to talk to you ahead of our season, of our planting season, which is only just around the corner. If we look back on the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've had a fantastic opportunity. We've had excellent weather, record yields, and everybody is in great form. And I know it was just wrapping up the end of the harvest this week, with a little bit to do in the coming days. People will be setting their minds now as regards what seeds are going to sow for autumn 21. So this morning, Tim is going to take some time to talk you through our options for winter barley, winter wheat, and winter oats. I suppose, Tim, we've in a very fortunate position. We've got a fantastic portfolio of winter barleys. I suppose what you might do over the next 10-15 minutes or so is maybe talk our attendees through what options there are there from a variety perspective. And I suppose how you see the winter planting season panning out.
So welcome to everyone there as well. We've a lot of customers online, so good to see you all this morning. Just making sure now this is going to pop up. Okay, so it is up in front of everyone. Yeah, that's okay. We have the background team here are actually doing a great job this morning. So I'm just going to minimize this out of the way. Okay. So look, I suppose this morning we're going through varieties, wheat, barley, and oats. And then I was chatting to one of the people yesterday, and he said wild horses won't hold people back from sowing early this year. And that's what I'm going to do a little bit about as well, holding back wild horses. So just a little bit of a play on the words. We have, oilseed rape is effectively over, so we're not going to concentrate on that now. We've met all of yourselves and spoke to you about oilseed rape anyway. We've had a very successful season with oilseed rape. We're very lucky to have very good varieties there on the list, very good varieties available coming onto the list, I think, for next year on oilseed rape. And I think, looking at a few crops that are above ground, there's very good vigor in seed, and it seems to be powering on. And the small drop of rain yesterday is really welcome from that perspective. So moving on, winter barley, the varieties that are available, the department released their list in the last week. It was an excellent, it's a comprehensive list. There's 10 varieties. I mean, to be fair, I don't think there's any winter barley grower in the country or agronomist that's given advice on winter barley that couldn't be disappointed with that list. There's something for everyone on it. Our own offering, as Nigel said, is strong. We have a 2-row there, which you're all aware of, casting, which came onto the list last year. The 2 hybrids, which have been there for a few years now, Belfry and Bazooka. The old favourite Cosmos, which is a conventional 6-row, and then the new kid on the block, Joyu, which is the BYDV barley. So I'll just go through them quite quickly, and then Nigel is going to rein me in, and we'll take a few questions as they come up. You can type a few questions there into the chat function, and we'll do our best to answer the questions, and if not, we'll get back to you afterwards. But in the conscious of time, because people are busy at this time of the year, I actually don't know how people have time to log in this morning unless you're eating the breakfast and listening to us. So look, casting, it's a very unusual 2-row in terms of its results. It's kind of it's not up or down. It's very much a steady Eddie variety, I suppose, is the way to put it. It had a very good year on farm in 2021. And I think, as advisors, people talking about this, agronomists, merchants, this is a variety that everyone will know about, I think, after 2021. Last year, I think Nigel was saying to me, Jez, he said, people haven't heard of casting. You haven't really spoken about it as much, but certainly I think after this year, everyone will have heard of casting because it had a very good year on farm, to be fair to it. Look, for ourselves, it's been on the list now. They're the 1 year results presented as a tree. It does a kind of a very steady 101, 102. It doesn't really vary up or down. And there are kind of three unusual years as well for winter barley. If I go back to the previous 3 years, again, 103, 102, 101. So very steady again. And look, to be fair to the Department of Agriculture, they've always, they've great trials, and casting seems to suit the Louth sites, the Dublin sites, the sites in Cork, etc. So it's a solid barley for around the country. In terms of its agronomics, look, it has a 5 for Rincosporium. People are worried about that. To be honest, I wouldn't be overly worried, because what we see in the trial sites, and I mentioned this at the open day, is that it doesn't seem to get the Rinco early on in the time. And I'll go into that in a second, in a few minutes. It's very good on mildew. The best on the list on mildew, really excellent variety on mildew. And that can rob disease early on in the season. You know, you could be there in the month of February with mildew coming into other competitor varieties, but you won't see that with casting. It does have a high grain number per square metre. That's where its yield is coming from. And I think, you know, grain number per square metre is more important for winter barley yield than grain size per se. And I think that's the reason why casting is able to do it each year. The dry year, 2018, the wet year, 2019, you know, high yield year, 2020, 2021, when it has those grain numbers per square metre, the grain fill per se isn't as, I don't know, important, and that's quite important on it. And look, I suppose a lot of people would have rang us up and said, Jesus, look at the length of the head on that. You know, it had a very impressive head there coming up to harvest. Looking well, something we've seen ourselves. Just moving on to the Rinco. With casting, we don't see the Rinco. This is February this year. Myself and Dennis Dunn, the trials manager, were in the trial site assessing over winter kill. We didn't see much Rinco compared to a competitor there. If you zoomed in on that picture, there's a lot of Rincosporium in the picture that's actually causing tillers to die. Casting doesn't seem to get Rinco before growth stage 30. The score is correct, but before growth stage 30, it doesn't get that early season Rinco. That's a picture the Eleanor in the marketing would have taken, one of our seed crops. That field had a really good year this year, same again last year. You know, a very solid barley. That grower delivers some high quality seed into us every year, and very interesting, 2 years in a row for very clean fields, you know, does very well. And I suppose, look, there would have been a little risk of take all there as well. Moving on then from casting onto the hybrids. Look, they're about 20% of the market, I suppose, Nigel, would be fair to say. Yeah. Demand is pretty strong again this autumn. I suppose if people wanted to get extra, they'd want to be ordering off you. No point ringing me, because I don't have the keys to the kingdom, as the fella says. But if you want, you know, order up your Belfry and Bazooka for sure, because it is important that you have the varieties that you're looking for. Nigel has, we've a lot of high quality seed in the sheds this year. You would have seen, if you follow Nigel on Twitter or ourselves, you would have seen the shed there with the good quality barley seed in it. Germinations are excellent. They're well at 90.
Germinations are all in the high 90s at the moment.
Yeah.
And disease is okay as well.
Yeah. So look, that's Belfry and Bazooka seed. Look, they are the most reliable barleys on the department list since 2016. Since they came into the trials, they've done the 108, 109, 110. They've done really well. Statistically speaking, Belfry's out-yielded the controls in nearly 30 out of 37 trials, which is pretty extraordinary when you look at it across 5 or 6 very variable years. They have the longest drilling window. I will get into that later on. You know, you can go from the 20th of September right through to 1st November. We're very comfortable, and growers, agronomists are very comfortable with that. Very much so suits the continuous barley sites. I think this is important for people putting them in, you know, barley after barley. You know, Rincosporium carries over in the stubble, in the trash, and that early season Rincosporium that comes in the trash, it's almost impossible to knock that with a spray. I mean, as good and all as proline is, but that early season Rincosporium is very hard to knock. That's where you need the resistance from the variety. Belfry, Bazooka with an 8 for resistance for Rinco, they're the best on the list. Okay, we've nothing better than them. They are very good. They are able to compensate for plant loss for sure. I mean, we sow a trial every year. Dennis, Dunn, myself, and Patsy before that. 4 stone to the acre, 6 stone to the acre, 8 stone to the acre. We never see a difference in yield in the hybrids when we drop it to 4 stone. Now, we're comfortable recommending 6 stone to the acre at 100 kilos, but certainly they can compensate for plant loss. And I think, look, in fairness, they have a very aggressive root structure, and that's really good against take-all, rhizotonia, things like that. Maybe where there's a bit of compaction, they certainly are able to compensate in that regard. And then the extra straw yield at the end certainly pays for the added cost of seed. I mean, you know, a couple of people would say that to us. Look, I would have spoken about this before, return on investment. It's very important for business decisions. I mean, anybody here, you know, deciding to build a shed or do anything like that, hire a new staff member, take on a piece of land and rent it, you know, it's return on investment. I mean, we would estimate, even if you put it at the top end of the scale, 20 euros an acre or 50 euros a hectare extra cost on seed. I mean, we still reckon, you know, based on the department trials and based on a bale to the acre extra of straw, round bale, that you're going to get a 4.5 times your return on your money. Okay, that's a decent investment. If you take that compared to weed control trials, the only published work I could get at was done by Brian Mitchell back in 1998 that was published. Look, he would have got 1.5 tons to the hectare spray versus no spray for weed control. You know, 32 euros an acre, 8 euros a hectare investment in herbicides. You get a 300 a hectare return on investment, or 370%. Very good return again. And then look, fungicides, I suppose we all spend most of our time 0.1 of that and 0.2 of that, and all the companies will be bringing you down to show you the trials and hopefully bring you for a bite to eat afterwards. And like for a 50 euro an acre investment in fungicides, you're going to get a kind of a 230 euros a hectare return. So look, we're definitely up there or ahead, in my opinion. And for a grower who's saying, oh, geez, I don't want to spend the 20 euros an acre, Nigel, you're killing me on the price or whatever, there is a very good return on investment from hybrids. I would say, you know, probably a lot better than decent return. Moving on then, and look, we get this question every year, seeding rates, it's 200 seeds to the square metre, doesn't matter whether it's a big seed or a small seed. This year, that's one of our labels. One of the lads in the shed, Shane, sent me that was there yesterday. It's on the Department of Agriculture label on the top of every bag, whether it's a big bag or a small bag, Belfier Bazooka, the weight of the bag is there. It says 510 kilos. You can see it stitched through it. There's no way we can cut the Department of Agriculture on that one, Nigel, anyway. So 510 kilos, divide that by 5 hectares, 102 kilos to the hectare, that's what you bang into your drill, or 6.5 stone to the acre in old money, okay? All the bags, the big bags are doing the 5 hectare, the small bag does 0.2 of a hectare. And look, very quickly, if you want to do it then, you divide the big bag weight by 5, that gives you the kilos per hectare. And if you want the small bag, it'll say 19 or 20 kilos. You multiply that by 5, okay? So it's a very simple way of doing it. It's all to do with the label, and that information is there on the department label, okay? So moving on then, a couple of things that you might get extra with Belfier Bazooka. You get a lot of information from Chagask on blackgrass. There's a lot of talk during the summer on blackgrass. And look, I suppose it was bad publicity for the seed trade, but it keeps us on our toes. Brome, in my opinion, is a bigger problem for us. Certainly hybrid barley, and I've seen this, and I know I would have shown you this at open days and at meetings and so on. There's outstanding brome suppression from hybrid barley, okay? And basically all the barley is doing is the barley grows up, the brome has to come with it. When you stretch the brome out, it's not able to put enough energy into the seed. So you get less seeds per square metre, less heads, and less size of seed. And it all works in about a 70% reduction in brome. You can see there in the picture, the brome on the right was grown in winter wheat, a very thick, dense crop of winter wheat. The brome in the middle then was grown in either 2-row barley or in 6-row conventional barley. And the brome on the left then, as you look at it, was grown in hybrid. And you can see what's happening. There's a stretching effect going on. So it's, you know, I suppose, look, a tall, thin plant, I suppose, versus a short, dense plant. But that tall, thin plant has put more of its energy into the stem and to survive against the barley, rather than the one that's in the wheat there, obviously, has got a lot more, what's the word, viability in it or whatever, okay? Look, we've seen this ourselves. This was myself and Paul Roach from Syngenta. We were looking at hybrid barley doing this a few years ago, and then we said, look, we'll do a trial. The trial was done in Edinburgh. COVID prevented us from going over to see it, actually. But these are pictures Paul sent me on the left. You know, a 6-row barley there, very competitive, but still not good enough on brome. The hybrid in the middle, it stretched it out, reduced the seed head. You can see the difference in size. And then that's my own house there on the right. And that's from a field in Clonmel where we had brome and a hybrid barley, and the difference in height was phenomenal, about a metre in difference in height. That's where the effect is coming from. But look, it's quite important to just note this, because it's an added value that you're getting out of hybrid barley, and we all have brome on farm, and this certainly does help. I suppose, look, the other thing is I mentioned about the effect of straw yield, and with the strong cooperation scheme, this is quite important. Dennis, the trials manager, hired this piece of kit there during the harvest. We weighed all the plots of barley there. It's you know, a nice kind of a robust way of doing it. Look, we would have got, as we thought the hybrids yielded a little bit more in terms of straw. Farmers are saying this was for years, and advisors, so look, it was nothing new to us. I will repeat this exercise again next year and the year after. We just did it this year because everyone was talking about straw, and we said we better have some bit of data. But like in terms of tons per acre, that was roughly 2.8 tons to the acre of straw. And you can see there the differences. So height of straw actually isn't really a big thing, because some of the conventional 6 rows, such as Cosmos, were quite tall, but they didn't have the weight of straw, okay? But that's just a chart on the straw yields. And I suppose, look, the hybrids backing up what we're seeing on farm. And then I suppose, look, the last barley I'll get a chance to talk about this morning is Joyu. It's our first BYDV barley on the lists in Ireland. We're very proud of that fact, because there's been a few before that, a few false starts, as the fella says. It did 103 on the recommended list, super KPH. I think that for me was the first thing I saw when we looked at the trial results in 2017. We actually, or 2018 actually, we didn't realize that a 6-row could have such a good KPH, conventional 6-row. Straw was excellent. That was really challenged this year and last year in the department trials. And a lot of farmers said that to us when they were cutting the Joyu this year. It was a lovely crop to cut. Very clean across the knife, flowed into the combine really well. Good disease, yeah, watch mildew, no doubt about it. It can get mildew because it's bringing that from one of the parents, which has the BYDV tolerance in it. And it's also the earliest variety to ripen. And I suppose, look, yesterday's meeting there in the department, John Joe Byrne would have mentioned a little bit on Ramillaria. It's not on the department list, but certainly we saw this year that Joyu was one of the best varieties on green leaf retention coming up to harvest. Very little Ramillaria in the Joyu, in the Belfry as well on our trial site. And to be fair to us, to Cassia, so there was quite a bit of pressure on our side this year, but Joyu stood up what we would say to Ramillaria, but we can't put that on. It's not on the recommended list. And I suppose, look, there are the things about Joyu, as well as that, it tolerates BYDV. So it's a good barley in its own right, and it tolerates BYDV. It's suitable for high pressure sites, maybe down along the Shore Valley, along the rivers there, you know, Mallow into Bandon, the Slaney as well, all those high pressure sites around Dublin, very much a high BYDV variety. It gives you BYDV protection from drilling to springtime, okay, and right through, but it doesn't affect after springtime, so no point in saying it. And it's independent, so whether it's a green aphid, a black aphid, or a brown aphid, doesn't matter whether the virus is MAV or PAV, the spray, or whether those aphids are resistant to the pyrethroids or not, this works, okay? This is information from KWS. Thanks to John Miles and Kirsty Richards on this one. This is a very high pressure, very unusual trial that was drilled now for the last 3 or 4 years in England. The 2-row there is just an ordinary conventional 2-row, plenty of BYDV in it. The 6th row in the middle got absolutely walloped. You can see there's stunting, there's actually plants missing. And then on the right, you have a parent of Joyu, which has the same resistance in it, okay? And you can see there's no effect. There's the odd yellow leaf, which we saw this year as well, but there's no effect on yield. The difference there would be 50% yield reduction. So it's an extreme BYDV infection site. That's an aerial shot of it. You can see there, anything that looks green is a BYDV tolerant barley, similar to Joyu, okay? Because KWS is where those come from. They've tested them all.
Tim, I suppose, look, at just before we're just coming into of the barley section, and look, thank you very much for that. It's quite insightful and a lot of information there. We have a number of questions coming in, and look, we're delighted. We've over 100 in attendance, so it's a fantastic, and acknowledge everybody. Just to I suppose reiterate 2 things. For those of you that have signed up and continue with us, there's 9 IASIS points for this event this morning. And also, more importantly, for those of you that stick with us until the end, we have 5 CTEC trousers, which will be announced when we come to the end.
Plastic trousers, I hope.
Yes, Tim, high quality. Now, in relation to, look at a couple of questions on the barley, and we'll move, because we're conscious we're going to wrap up for 10:15. Couple of questions. I suppose one question came in there from David. If somebody's looking at hybrids, and you're considering them, Belfry or Bazooka, which is the best option for those that haven't dipped their toe in hybrids?
From my money, it's Belfry, because look, it's the one that we're sure of in terms, like with the Department of Agriculture high nitrogen testing regime. It's the one that stands best out of all the barleys we have, Nigel, out of all the barleys on the list.
Okay.
And I think, look, to be fair, lodging is too much of a risk for people to, suffer on the first year. And certainly you won't. Belfry is as good a yield as Bazooka, but certainly in terms of lodging, it has the edge.
Okay, thanks for that, Tim. On Bazooka, then it's there for 5 years now, I think, in relation to it, and growers are getting fantastic results out of it. With its higher straw yield, is there a requirement from a nutrient point of view for potash, or is there anything that should be looking at from that perspective?
Yeah, so potash should be the big one. Once you start taking 15 plus ground bales to the acre, I mean, you'd really want to be putting a little bit extra potash on compared to normal. Like on the trial site, we'd always go with about 130, 140 kilograms, or maybe 100 units per acre. And it's important that you watch that, because potash can drop very fast out of a field, and you can have potash fixing clays as well. So it's important to know, people know their own soil anyway, and they'll know, but extra potash for sure for straw, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Tim. There was a question. Look, there's other questions. We'll come back separately after the event, after this morning's session. There was a question also I'll take in relation to seed availability in general. In relation, look, we've all thankfully had a good harvest this year.
Yeah.
As Tim alluded to earlier on, we have good quality seed over the weighbridge, which we're processing, packing, cleaning, and packing and treating at the moment as we speak. As regards varietal, I suppose for the market of winter barley, which is, I suppose, 70,000 hectares, it requires about 11,500 tons of certified seed to do that, which is, that amount is over the line. As a breakdown, you're looking at LG casting is in the region of 25% of seed availability this year. You're looking at the hybrids are in the region of, as regards to what they will be able to sow, between Bazooka and Belfry in the region of 23-24% again. Then you come down to the likes of our Joyu, which is in the region of 10. Cassia, which is a variety there as well, continuing on, it's in the region of 15, I think 16%, and then you've got your Valerie and your other varieties that are coming along. Our own Cosmos as well, which we haven't mentioned, it's a reliable 6-row conventional. There is some seed of that in the market. So look, I think we'll move on to wheat now. Okay. I suppose when a good number of our customers who are on this morning were actually joined us at our CTEC trial site back last June. and I suppose we were quite optimistic about the wheat portfolio at the time. A lot of you will have seen the recommended list and have seen the output of that in recent days. So Tim, you might just give us your tuppence worth on that and what you think, and with the impact, I suppose, that Septoria has had on wheat, where you see, I suppose, wheat going, or wheat variety.
So I suppose, look, winter wheat this year was the big crop on farm. I mean, it's funny, when yields are good, no one talks about them, and very hard to hear anyone talking about yields this year. I mean, if you went into the pub and said you did 5 tons to the acre in some parts of the country, that wouldn't get you around. Okay, you'd want to be over the 6 to get around, bought you in some places. But certainly, look, wheat was very good. It's the crop that pays the bills now on a lot of these arable farms. And like, we know ourselves that the most profitable rotation on a farm is where there's arable crops, is winter crops, and winter wheat's the main crop there. So like your big yields, big profitability is going to come from winter wheat. It's around 60 to 65,000 hectares every year. And look, with all the oilseed rape gone in, I think and the rape and the beans that are coming out early, I think winter wheat will actually be a big crop again, Nigel. And people are going to be looking at sowing, I'd say, pretty soon. So look, Graham has been on the list now for 3 years. I just popped up a couple of things. I'm not going to go on, everyone knows about it now. What's important about Graham is, since it came on the list, its lodging, its septoria, and its yellow rust haven't slipped. And that's quite important. And I know, look, we would have been saying this to people in 2019 when they were taking a chance on it. We said, look, this is a pretty solid variety. It's not a flashy variety. It didn't have the 106s or 107 for yield, but it had a nice steady 100, 102, thereabouts. But I think its disease is what we kind of reckoned that this would be, a nice, solid, handy variety. And like, as it stayed the pace and its resistances haven't slipped, certainly it's become more and more popular. People are depending on it. And look, I suppose that's a function too of the septoria pressure in Ireland. Yellow rust is a bigger disease now than it was 10 years ago. And certainly people are, relying on Graham there. I suppose for early drilling, it's important. Look, we have it down there from around the 20th of September. Graham is suitable. It's slow enough to move in the autumn. And certainly if you had a choice, if you're, drilling early out of our portfolio, we'd go with Graham. Certainly from the 20th, and we'll go through drilling in a few minutes because we have a little chart on that. But I think the important thing is to just look at the department list. And like, when the department list comes out, everyone just looks at the one that's there. But if you go back and look at the previous number of years, you'll see that Graham hasn't slipped for septoria. It wasn't a 7, it was never a 7. It came on as a 6, it stayed as a 6. Other varieties came on as 7s and dropped to 5s and 6s, but not Graham, it stayed the way it was. And it's very solid on lodging as well. I know last year the storms there in August, which were kind of, I would say, 1 in a 30-year event, people were saying about Graham and head loss, but I don't think that's going to be a problem in many years, to be honest, so I wouldn't be worried about it. In terms of what's coming onto the list, this is the Department of Agriculture's 1-year result for the candidates, and I'm only going to flash this up because this isn't something that's published by the department. But certainly when you look at it across 3 years, you get the average. But, compared to what's coming, and look, the department would have mentioned this yesterday as well, John Joe, like, there isn't a lot of new material on the line out. Graham's yield is still the best versus the new kids. Now, that's like a lad coming into retirement age on a senior county hurling team being able to outpace the guys that are coming in from the under 21s. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. So we've got an old variety ahead of the newer varieties. So it's quite important just to note that. Okay. Look, I'll move on from Graham, Nigel, if you don't mind, and we'll move on to the others. This is something, look, I suppose when you go to the race courses, they talk about betting without the favourite, okay? And like, it's the same thing with Graham. Like, what are you going to put in as a second choice or a third choice to Graham? We can't all grow it. Certainly, look, Nigel would love to sell all the seed in the world of it, but like, that would be, if I let him do that, it would be a little bit what's the word, remiss of me, because the variety would be very much exposed. Like astronomer for us, maybe I'm after going wrong. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, astronomer for us is a variety we hoped to come onto the recommended list. We multiplied up a little bit of the seed there and put our money where our mouth was. But look, it hasn't come on because of the question marks over Septoria and the cougar story that was brought to the fore by Chagas Research. And it's great that you have, you know, scientists like Dr. Stephen Kildea there that can figure out what's going on in the field rather than the rest of us scratching our heads. You know, within 12 months of this problem occurring in Ireland, Stephen had a paper published, which is, you know, pretty much a very fast way of coming up with research answers. So look, there's a high yield potential with astronomer, no question about that. It's excellent on rust, no question mark with its mark on rust, and fusarium for that matter. Septoria, I reckon if it got on the list, it'll be around a 4. I mean, there's 2 or 3 other varieties on the list of the 4 at the moment. To be brutally honest, I think astronomer's slightly stronger than him, but it has this risk with the cougar. Exceptionally strong on straw, bushel weight or kph, and resistance to sprouting. So look, it has an awful lot going for it. And like if Septoria can be managed in terms of sowing date, in terms of location, you know, in terms of the chemistry as well, I mean, I think it's a very strong variety to have in the portfolio. And like it's a variety that is not going to be letting you down when you come to cut it, I think. Moving on then, Inciter is now fully recommended. For us, it's a very solid variety. It's our second choice to Graham. Very, very big yield potential, a very good disease package. 5 for Septoria. Now that's a reliable 5. I mean, last year in the trials, this year, sorry, we would have seen other varieties, competitor varieties, who were also scored a 5. And in middle of June, we started to see them separate. And we just didn't know what was going on. But when we saw the department list, we knew then that some varieties had slipped from a 5 to a 4, but not Inciter. It held its Septoria score. It has a 7 for rust, a good solid there. And it's a big variety. It's a bulky variety. Like when you see it growing in the field, you'll think you'll never cut it because it's a big variety in the field. It does need plant growth regulators, but can easily be managed. I mean, there's no arable farm, tillage farmer or advisor that won't be able to manage it. I would say if anything, it suits the continuous slots, maybe lighter soils because of that root mass biomass. And it also suits the later drill slots because it is able to get going in the autumn quick, and it builds up a big biomass. So I think in terms of suiting a variety, I think they're the slots that it suits. And like there's a bit of seed there, Nigel.
There's 2-3% of the seed is there for Inciter. So it is a small amount and it'll be on allocation this year.
Okay. So that means you have to be a friend of Nigel's to get a bit. Is that it?
Tim's.
So that's the wheat, Nigel. Is there a question on wheat? Or?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of questions, and look, you've touched on them a little bit. There's a question there on the Inciter seed availability. Okay. I suppose look at 2 questions, just I suppose on the astronomer, and one question in relation to is it more suited to Northeast, and then there's a question, Tim, in relation to it with a 4 for Septoria and with the cougar gene issue. Is there a possibility that it could weaken further this year? So I think you've touched on those 2.
Yeah, I mean, look, definitely suitable to the Northeast. I mean, when I was on my trip around the country this year, I used to leave here, go to Moore Park, then go to Cork, and it was like going into the death zone, you could say, for Septoria. I mean, Cork was really the Olympics of Septoria this year, and if a variety survived in Cork, it was going to, make it. Look, when we went up then into Kildare with a satellite site, trial site in Kildare this year, very hard to see any disease in Kildare, right up to the middle of Grainfill. Then we went up to the Northeast, and the same story again. So I would say astronomer suitable to the Northeast. Like I grew it myself this year in Clonmel, kept the Septoria out of it, no great issue. It certainly is, I would say a 4 if it's listed, but then again, so are other varieties on the list. So one thing about the cougar genetics, and look, this is like, yourself and your brothers and sisters, you're all from the same parents, but you actually have different recombination of genes. So just because Cougar is in the parentage, it may not be all the Cougar genetics are being relied on for Septoria. Now, that's a kind of a theoretical argument, but look, in the field, and I know we're Scorton and it's our variety, but we'd rate Astronomer definitely at the upper end of those Cougar genes varieties for Septoria. Okay, I think its other parents are bringing more to the party than some of the other Cougar varieties. Okay, but that's a theoretical argument.
And I suppose the point there is that, look, we will probably see varieties coming in the future. It's something maybe just not to write a variety off because you see that.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't be. I mean, I think we'd be foolish. I mean, looking at everything else it has, I mean, like if you're in a kind of a low pressure septoria situation, if you sow it a little bit later, like not September, sow it from the middle of October on, I mean, I think you're reducing your risks really well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Look at Tim. Thanks for that. And look at if any other questions come in on that, on wheats or indeed the barleys, if we don't get them, feel free to. We'll come back afterwards. I suppose, Tim, the last section, oats.
Yeah.
Husky's not going away.
No, not going away yet. Thankfully. Yeah. So look, as I would say, Husky's like the Hoover of oats at this stage. It's kind of the name that people are asking for, just like Barra was before it for a number of years. I think Husky's starting to fit that bill of reliability. Look, we've had it in trial with the Department of Agriculture since 2007. A lot of people mightn't realise that because it really only got more popular in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's extraordinarily consistent in terms of its yield, and I'll go through that now in a second. We can drill it from, excuse me, Nigel, from mid-October to mid-April. So there's ultra flexibility there. For a person multiplying up oat seed, I mean, Husky, or if you buy oat seed, you can get it delivered there to your sheds the middle of October, and you have until the middle of April to sow it and end up with a very respectable crop of oats, be it winter or spring sown. It has proven winter hardiness in trials and on farm, and I'll go through that in a second. It's a stiff oat to stand. Look, we all know how to manage it at this stage, and I think growers, got on really well with oats this year. I mean, I'd say when all's said and done, there was more people with 4-ton crop of oats out there this year than actually 4-ton crops of winter barley, Nigel, to be fair. And it's early to mature. I mean, a lot of our oat seeds, you know, we're always here planning the harvest and what barley will come in and what wheat will come in. And I'll say to the lads, well, you could have oats in here on the last day of July. And then, you know, it does nearly always happen. Winter oats can come into us the last days of July, especially if there's a good year. And that's a great thing for a grower. Get the oats out of the way and get onto other crops as well, because oats can be a difficult crop, especially if it's broken harvest. So look, it's got a lot of characteristics that are important. I mean, that's the Department of Agriculture trials winter and spring since 2007. Husky only in 2 years has been below the average, and that was back in 2007 and 2009. And I suppose, look, Seed Tech took a call that they'd stick with us. They were lucky. I mean, somebody else might have dropped that oat, and you know where we'd be then. We wouldn't have Husky. So it has performed really well. It's generally, you know, 2 to 3, 4 points ahead of the average, and it's been the average itself. So it's beaten itself most years. And I don't have the spring oat trials, obviously, for 2021 yet, but I have the 2021 trials, and it's done the same thing again. The average yield there, just for people who might want to know it, if you were to look at the 15 years data, the average yield is about 3.5 tons for the winter oats and about 2.8, 2.9 tons for the spring oats. So there's about a 0.5 ton to the acre benefit from growing a winter versus a spring oat. And look, people know that already, but it's quite important just in terms of, you know, planning to sow it as well. Husky as a winter oat, much better in terms of its reliability. So look, this is the same data set, but compared to controls, and this is kind of important. Like there is genetic improvement. So the department trials in 2008 yielded kind of 8 tons to the hectare. The department trials in 2021 yielded 10 tons to the hectare. And you can see there's been a nice steady increase with a few bumps along the way. The big bump was 2018 with the drought. Okay, but look, hopefully we wouldn't see a year like that again. In terms of the reliability, Husky is the red line there, or the orange line, and it's above the controls each year, okay? And that's really important, that even though genetic gain, breeders are moving forward, but Husky's still able to outperform the controls. And that's quite important, you know, because if there was better genetics coming on, they're not able to suit us in Ireland as much as Husky is, okay? When you came down to the open day this year, we showed people damage that we saw in our plots, frost or spray damage, probably an interaction between them, to be fair. Look, Andy reported in the Farmers Journal, there was a number of advisors and growers rang us as well in April and May, and I spent a bit of time driving around looking at these crops of oats. At the time, you know, people didn't know what was going on. Generally, people thought it might have been, maybe mosaic, but like when we saw it in Seed Tech, we weren't sure until the heads came out. But when the heads came out, then we knew what we were dealing with, because I had seen this before in 2008. And basically, it was frost damage in February or March that affected the head, and the plant then tried to compensate by making more tillers. So when we analysed our trials and when we cut them, we got a yield impact of 38%, which was hugely significant. So our crop surrounding the trials was Husky, did it 4 tonnes to the acre, just like most growers. But the plots of other varieties inside the trials were kind of, you know, they were nearly 40% reduced in yield, which was huge. And you would have seen that when you came down to us. But more importantly, the bushel was affected. Some of these oats in in our trials were actually reduced by 9 bushel points. So there was quite an impact on it, okay? That's a picture that we would have taken in May. And the variety on my left is a spring oat variety drilled in our winter trials, as we do every year. And the variety on my right hand there is Husky, which is its normal development. But what we've tried to, what we looked at was, we said, well, that damage, that yellowing, that colouring, how important was it? Because sometimes these things recover. People say, oh, sure, look, it'll be fine, it'll grow out of it. But if you look at the chart there on the right, all I've done there is we scored all the plots for kind of visual damage. And when we scored them, we got a very nice correlation between that and the yield at the end of the day. Husky was the highest yielding variety in our trials at 10.2 or 4 tonnes to the acre. All the other varieties yielded below Husky, but the visual damage correlated to yield. So if a variety went off colour, if it had those tillers, it actually had a big drop in yield, okay? So it was just a handy way of predicting. People often ask us about that, how bad will it turn out? It was pretty much correlated with the damage we saw in May, okay? Sorry, Nigel.
Yeah, I suppose just no, go on to the next slide there, Tim. I suppose just to put into context the last section that you're coming up on.
Yeah.
And look, I know we're just conscious we're coming up on 10:15.
Yeah.
We're a minute or two late starting, so bear with us till 10:20. We'll get finished.
Yeah.
We've had a bumper harvest this year. You know, I heard you saying it's the best in 50 years, and we've had a combination of record yields, excellent prices. And to top it all off, we've had the weather as well to get it through. And, you know, as we've said, we've got a good area of oilseed rape in. I suppose you devised our drilling plan over the last 2 years. And I suppose to put it into context for those that are tuning in this morning, I suppose, when we sat down and we looked at our previous harvest, and when we looked at the CSO figures that came out, you know, it was quite stark that there was 400,000 tonne less grain produced that year compared to an average of a year.
Yeah.
You know, and when you put that into context, you know, of just use today's prices, that's almost 80 million euros that's not washing around the system, that the guys that are tuning in this morning aren't writing out checks to pay their farmers, that the farmers aren't coming in and circulating that around the industry. So it's quite stark. I suppose from our context, we've looked at this, and I suppose how farmers can maximize their opportunity to get in as much in the autumn period.
Yeah.
And you might just talk us through that for the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, so look, as I said, look, it's like holding back wild horses here. People are going to be anxious to get going at it. The drilling plan is basically to try and come up with 13 or 14 weeks between the middle of August and the middle of November that you can get into winter crops that you plan to get in, okay, that are profitable for you. And I suppose, look, when we look back in autumn 2019, and please God, we won't have the same problems again. We lost a lot of hectares of land that were converted to spring crops. They didn't do as good, no surprise there, and we lost 80 million euros, as you said, okay? Look, oilseed rape, it's still another week there in oilseed rape sowing. I mean, we'll be sowing seed oilseed rape next week ourselves. We've got a couple of bags of oilseed rape that you're delivering out there at the moment. Like our Aviron and Aurelia, they can actually yield really, really well in the middle of September. I mean, this time last year, CTech happened their winter oilseed rape trial summer, okay? And we drilled and we yielded 1.9 tons to the acre. So, I mean, you know, we're what are we on now? The 10th of September. Like this time last year, we had no sign we were going to sow it. So, like, I wouldn't be worried if somebody has an oilseed rape in, and if they're thinking of putting it in with the good forward prices, I think there's still time. The trouble is, you might have seed for them. Okay, so that's another problem, but we'll move on from that. Looking forward, then, I mean, the next crops that we're looking at drilling, I suppose, hybrid rye is a crop that we've promoted in CTech. We have a hybrid rye webinar on Monday morning, same time, 9:30 to 10:30. The invite's gone out, and we'll resend it again there this afternoon. That's a crop that you can start drilling kind of from the middle of September on. It bridges that little gap between oilseed rape and winter barley, okay? And rye doesn't get take all, so it really helps. It seems to be not affected as much by barley yellow dwarf virus, and it certainly is able to yield in those kind of lighter soil types, especially. But we'll do that all on Monday. Okay, we'll go through that on Monday. The next variety that we think that's suitable for sowing is the Belfry and the Bazooka. We're fairly confident that they can be drilled successfully from around the middle of September on. Certainly from the 20th of September, those 6-row hybrids, they're being used quite a bit for people to get going, to get drilling. Depends on the location in the country. But certainly from the 20th of September on, there will be Belfry and Bazooka going out into fields should the weather present itself, okay? The beauty about the Belfry and the Bazooka is you can go the right way through then onto the 1st of November, okay? And even into November, because they have the ability to compensate in the springtime. And like, as I said, might have said it earlier on, you know, we recommend a pack to 5 hectares, big bag. When you get later, you increase the seeding rate a little bit. And certainly we had that a few times, and we've had very successful crops of Belfry and Bazooka sown late into more difficult conditions. They're the go-to one, okay? The Jayu, it's not a hybrid, but it does have the BYDV tolerance. So that's certainly a problem that you could be facing with early drilling, but it doesn't have the take-all tolerance. So there's always a question mark, a debate. Is it BYDV on one hand or take-all on the other? Which is my risk? I mean, people will have to go through the risk analysis on that for themselves. And I have a slide on that in a minute. And then you're into the standard barleys, which are, you know, kind of from around the 20th of September on, 25th of September, the 2 rows like casting, and then your winter malts, which we didn't mention at all, but there's a little bit of winter malt going on. So look, our guide is there. It's on our website. It'll be sent out in the afternoon with the slides and that. And it's our, you know, our best advice in terms of seeding rate. I suppose, look, I just whipped apart some of the Department of Agriculture data from their trial sites, and over the 5 years, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, what we see is hybrids, when they're sown early, have a bigger benefit than sown later over the 2 rows. Now, they're still better off, but the benefit is earlier. And I think that's coming back to take-all. I think it's coming back to a bit on BYDV. And just remember, the Department of Agriculture don't dress for take-all, and they don't dress for BYDV. They never have. They never used ready go to terror. So there's some element of BYDV and some element of take-all in that, okay? So if you are going early, the hybrid is the one to start out with, in my opinion. And if you're at the trial data, even though, look, to be fair to the department, this data sets aren't designed to discover this answer. You know, I'm taking a bit of a poetic license on it, but, you know, 5 years data is a very strong data set to have. And I'm comparing the varieties that have been there for 5 years. Obviously, as time moves on, we can move to newer varieties, but at the moment, that's the result that's there. And I would say, look, we talk about in hurling those hard yards and the couple of inches in rugby at the ruck. I mean, if you're going into a dirty ball, as they say, at the bottom of a ruck, it's a Belfry or bazooka you'll throw in there to get it back for you. Okay, so those fields that are more difficult, earlier sowing, they might get wet, they might do heavy clay, you might be expecting rabbits. They're the places where the hybrid should be put. Okay, because that's going to make you the most money, return on investment. Okay. Look, moving on then quickly, seeding rate, very simply, it's your 1,000 grain weight, which is on your bag, multiplied by how many seeds you want to sow, divided by 100. Okay, so look, if we take it then, the casting will have 1,000 grain weight of 55, multiply it by 350 seeds is what you want to sow based on the Chicas calculator, divided by 100, 12 stones to the acre, okay, or 190 kilograms to the hectare. That table there is kind of a very rough figure because it's for wheat, oats, and barley. But certainly, I mean, if you go onto the Chicas website, there's plenty of information on that, or you can, go with your own gut on it. But I think, get the seeding rate right, because there can be large differences in 1,000 grain weights with varieties. Yeah, and we see that ourselves. Moving on then to take all, and this is coming back to something that we had there with the drilling plan. Why wouldn't you sow the 12th of September? Why don't you go out tomorrow and start sowing? Take all is the biggest issue there, in my opinion. I mean, look, rotation where it's profitable, crop of rye might be more profitable where take all is really bad. Use the hybrid barley where take all is expected. Things like that, like pick the variety to suit your situation. Very hard to predict take all. I mean, bad years, 2007, there was a year 2014, I think. Very hard to predict ahead of time, but take all can be a right disaster and take from you. Well, sure, take all, that's where I got its name from. Delayed sowing certainly helps, high risk. Rolling in the autumn, some years it works out, some years you swear I'll never touch a roller again in the month of October because of what happens afterwards, but certainly a firm seed bed. Good husbandry, very basics, grass weeds in your break crops, rolling, nutrition, especially phosphorus and manganese help with take off, okay? And then look, for my money, latitude is definitely pays on a second wheat. Continuous wheat and winter barley, it's break even, but that's good enough for a grower to justify, in my opinion, okay? Because look, you don't want to be, it's like buying insurance for your car. Everyone pays with third-party fire theft, and most people then pay for comprehensive because they know hopefully they'll never use it, but if they do, they have it, okay? So that's your latitude story. But certainly I think with the varieties we have now, the hybrids, with the choice maybe to grow rye, if it's still an option for you, if your merchant will take it off you or you want to sell it, I think take all shouldn't be as big an issue so early as it was, okay? As I said to you last year or the year before, like a crop of rape sown in the middle of September will do better than a crop of barley sown in the middle of September, because the take all won't be an issue, and it can be an issue with the barley, okay? Fertility, it's definitely something that we talk about every year to people. You go out to a field and they say, oh, I never took a soil sample, and Jesus, why isn't the corn growing? Because, I forgot lime or something like that. It's put you to sleep, but just remember, it is important if you're taking on new land, or perhaps this year, something as simple as, God, you know what it is, Tim, I grew a crop and it's after yielding 15 round bales to the acre of straw. I mean, that's a field that you take a soil sample in, and move on from it. And then the last one then, look, that's just a canary grass. If you can identify it early on, you can solve the problem, okay? And certainly, 1 year seeding is 7 years weeding, or a stitching time saves 9. And that's an important thing, just with sterile brome, with canary grass. Hopefully you won't ever see blackgrass on the farms, but certainly there's early prevention, early control is very important, okay? And the reason why I put up the roots was you can see the pink color on the tips of the roots, and that's the only grass that has that, which is the canary grass, okay? So that's it then. Look, I suppose that's our portfolio, Nigel. Choose a variety to drill early, but Belfry for me, Graham if it's wheat, or Joyo if you're not worried about take all. If you wanted to later, I think Bazooka more than Belfry, if the later ones, because it's the bigger variety. Inciter certainly for the wheats, Astronomer and Husky for the oats. And then I suppose, look, for the difficult slots, yeah, Belfry for sure, Joyo, Graham, they're the ones that'll get you out of a hole.
Okay. Just Tim, I suppose just before we wrap up, now we have a question. We won't name who the person that came from up in the northeast. They probably want to gloat on the yields of wheat they have. But I suppose just you give a summary of from talking to farmers and talking to customers how wheat is done, how it has ended up as you go up the country from south to north.
Yeah, I suppose, look, if you were to start down in Middleton, there's a half a ton or quarter of a ton extra then when you come up into North Cork, South Tip. As you go up the country, then you're heading towards, like, there's crops in Tipperary and Cork did 5 ton. But certainly as an average, I think we're probably between 4 and 4.5 tons to the acre. As you go up the country, though, certainly there's some farms are heading from 4.5, 4.5, 4.6 tons to the acre. And I think, look, silence is golden. When people aren't talking about yields, it's a big yield year. That's the way I look at it always. When it's a low yield year, people will shout about the good crop. But certainly the high yield year, I think most people have got on quite well. And look, that's great because we haven't had this big year in a long time, and we do need it for reinvestment into the industry. I mean, expenses are going up because of logistical issues more than anything. And I mean, that better than anyone, bringing in stuff from the continent. It's gone bananas, like. And certainly it's got more expensive to do business out there.
Okay, look at Tim, thank you very much. I think that was quite a comprehensive roundup of our portfolio, but not only of that, I think there was some useful insights there to be taken from this morning. It's all about maximizing that window and ensuring that, when the weather does provide its opportunity, that you've got as much acres in the ground as possible.
Lads must be desperate for trousers.
I tell you, and I made a deal as well. I said if we broke the 100, we said we'd do 5, and if we broke the 100, I'd do an extra one. So we're going to have 6 trousers to give out in a minute. I'm just after being handed in the winners of that, so we'll announce them. So I suppose announce them in a moment. But I think just as well for those of you, I know we've been talking to you over the last couple of weeks. Seed availability from ourselves. Look at as regards Belfry Bazooka, it's treated, it's on the floor. As we always say, if there are special mixes there where people want latitude or they want manganese or a specific treatment, it's always better to let us know sooner rather than later, because it's not something that you can turn around a seed plant and put something out the next morning. We have wheats will be going on the floor next week. We have some on the floor this week, so orders for that, get them in as early as possible, and it'll help in the supply chain of getting out. Seed treatments this year, I suppose as a single purpose treatment, we're using Redigo Pro, we're using Kinto Plus. And latitude also available with manganese as well if required. Just to remind you, the guys here, Eleanor and Mia and Romy, our marketing team, those of you that have logged on, everybody will be getting their 9 IASIS points. We've 9 IASIS points going out to you. And to remind you also of the ROI webinar that's on Monday morning for Tim, for those of you that at the same time, for those of you that have a specific interest in that. Sorry, is there one other question? Sorry, my apologies. How much extra oilseed rape has gone out?
Probably 20% in it, is it?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one to call this year because there was, as everybody is aware, there were supply chain issues. So I know our amount is up significantly on previous year because we did have the correct supply chain in place. It's difficult to know. I'd say maybe overall, is it up 15-20%?
I'd say so, yeah.
Maybe something in that region. Yeah. In that region. Okay, so look at, I would like to finally thank you all for joining us this morning. It's a different way of doing things. We can't sit around and have the normal chat afterwards, but look, we will be catching up with you in the coming days. And if there's any questions and if we haven't addressed them, feel free to give Tim or myself a call. thank you all for taking the time. Thank Tim for the time he put into preparing the presentation, and also thank the marketing team and our technical team that are behind us, the IT team that are working in the background here to get this all to work. So look, with that, I call the meeting or the seminar or the webinar over, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Okay.
Thank you very much.